my grandmother used to take me to Medicine Lodge, Kansas, and that was a very special place to her. She's part Comanche, and she would take me to the powwows, just the two of us. And it was the first time I'd ever gotten lost in music with the drumming. And we were going home, and she's driving a pickup, smoking her cigarette, and that was my grandma, just as cool as could be. And she said, baby, she said, when you were born, you were set on a path, and people call that your medicine road. And she said, you have to remember that everything you do in your life, everything from the way you move in the world, the way you treat other people, the way you talk to yourself, the way you eat, everything is your medicine. And I think she planted the seed for what later would become for me integrative medicine. That I believe that many people already had that sort of rooted, grounded way of thinking about the way you live your life.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today, I'm honored to have on Dr. Tieraona Low Dog. Welcome to the show, Tieraona.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mason.
You're most welcome. And I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit more. I'm familiar with your work, but I want to kind of kick things off with getting to know your background a little bit more. So where did you grow up, and what was a young Tieraona like?
So I grew up a lot in the woods. I wanted to be a park ranger when I grew up. So I thought, what could be better? You could ride a horse and wander around the forest and tell people to put out their fires. So I was a Girl Scout, and so all the things that could keep me with horses. I had horses. I had a horse growing up. And so for me, this deep, long love of nature itself. And so flora and fauna. I love the animals. I love wildlife. I love trees. I'm deeply drawn to great big towering pines and Douglas fir. And I liked to fish as a kid. So I think I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and my people from Oklahoma, Kansas, South Dakota, a little bit Nebraska, but that whole middle part of the country. And I think that from a very young age, because I was so much outdoors, that it really fostered a deep love for the environment and for nature in general. And I love the plants. My great-grandmother was a midwife, and my grandmother shared with me all kinds of things that she would use. And then, later on, I studied midwifery myself. And so I think I sometimes feel, Mason, like I feel sad for kids today, because I think many children don't get that freedom to just be out in the woods or out by the lake or playing in streams, catching frogs. I mean, that was my life. And I think for my generation, I think that there was still a lot of that for kids. And I think today there's that children don't get that same sort of level of being out in nature, so unencumbered and so free. And I worry that a generation that wants to be very close to nature and where their food comes from and, have this really strong ethos around that, has a big disconnection from it too, because they just haven't spent much time in it.
Yeah, I grew up in West Eugene, and where I used to live was essentially kind of almost the border of the countryside. And I would just do just that. I'd go to the streams over there and catch crawdads, actually. And then, and now when I go back now, it's a lot more developed. So it does seem like the city just keeps expanding, allowing less opportunity for kiddos to, be immersed in nature. Also, I got to say, I have an Oklahoma connection as well. I was born in Oklahoma City. Not many people know that, but so it sounds like your grandparents were influences on you, but did you have any early herbal mentors?
Well, I think that for me, it was interesting because everybody in the family knew something about herbs. I mean, so it's I also think that generations, my parents passed in 2020, both of them, and my brother, all within 88 days of each other, which was very difficult for our family. But all my parents and my grandparents all knew, how to use plantain and what sage gargle was for a sore throat, or drinking chamomile for quieting children, or echinacea. Actually, I knew echinacea as a kid for fevers and sore throats, and also for wounds. My grandmother was a lover of comfrey. Stuff grew all over, like took over her garden. But I mean, so I think that generation, also rural people of that time, knew more about how to take care of themselves using the things around them. I mean, my grandmother would also use like an onion plaster, right? She would cook an onion and then she'd plaster it on your chest, and mustard plasters on our chest. I mean, so there were a lot of home remedies that people used because nobody went to the doctor back then. Nobody went to the doctor. I fractured my collarbone getting thrown from a horse when I was 10 or 11 years old. And my dad didn't even think I needed to go to the doctor. I really wanted to go to the doctor because my bone was sticking out. And my mother said, I think we should take her in. But even there, to that level, people were like, my dad said, well, there's not much you can do for a broken collarbone, which he was correct, but it needed to be cleaned out and looked at. So I see also in modern times today how we're not teaching our kids what is a healthy fever. What is a healthy fever? And your 4-year-old, are they still eating? Are they peeing? Yes, they have a fever and they're fussy and they don't feel good, but they're eating, they're peeing, they're drinking, and that does not require a trip to the doctor in most cases. And I say this as a physician, I'm saying this as a family doctor, that we overutilize urgent cares and emergency rooms for oftentimes things that don't require that level of care. And what often happens then is that we end up prescribing antibiotics for minor conditions that an antibiotic is not beneficial for, because they're often viral. And also it contributes to overuse of antibiotics and antibiotic resistance. So, I am grateful for the fact that I grew up more rural with more of a exposure that didn't seem like something different. I thought everybody knew that because I thought everybody's grandparents kind of knew that, and your parents sort of knew the same thing. Sage gargle was huge in our house for any kind of sore throat. And so I yarrow was another one for fever. So some of these things were just commonly known and used. And I fear that some of that knowledge is really being lost. And also even with herbal medicine, Mason, there's this strong move for everything to be standardized and to be in a pill and an extract, and to be oftentimes quite costly, where sage you could grow in your garden and you could just dry it yourself, and you've got a sore throat remedy and you've got a remedy for fever and upset tummy, and you can cook with it. I mean, you can do everything with it. Thyme is another one of my favorites that, every house should have thyme, because it's for indigestion, poor tummy problems, bad cough, as an expectorant, cough suppressant, helps thin mucus, makes it easier to get out. It's still approved in Germany and Europe for whooping cough, because it's such an effective cough remedy. So, I also look at industry, herbal industry, and then I look at herbalists, and then I look at the common person, and that I don't want to see herbal medicine all relegated to high potency standard extracts that are basically pharmaceutical drugs masquerading as herbs. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for standardized extracts. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's this strong movement for everything to become that. And I think that that's a dangerous trend.
Yeah. Looking at your history, you grew up in this household where you were using herbal medicine, but then you told your dad, I want to go see a doctor. And then maybe that compelled you later on to become a doctor. So do you kind of identify more as a doctor disguised as an herbalist, or the other way around?
Oh, I think I'm just I think I'm a healer. And I say that in humility, because I believe that we're all healers, and I think that some of us are called into the healing profession. And with that comes a responsibility also to be responsible about the medicines we choose to use. and that when food can do the trick, when herbal medicine can do the trick, then we should be relying on these: movement, lifestyle, managing our stress, promoting sleep, all of these kinds of things, which we know can help prevent many of the chronic disease burden that we're seeing today. But as a physician, I also have the ability to prescribe an antibiotic or to give somebody a blood pressure medication or refer for surgery. To me, I don't like separating everything. For me, it's just what's most needed, and also what is most consistent with this individual's values, their health goals, their own personal desires, their culture. All of these things play a role in every decision that we have to make when it comes to how do we address whatever that person is coming to seek my counsel for, because really I'm just a partner, right? I partner with people on their journey, and I've been very blessed to be able to do that for a very long time. I'm an herbalist. I'm a martial artist. I'm a midwife. Nice. I'm a mixed heritage gypsy physician, right? I mean, and that's kind of, and a mother and a wife, and all of these things, they make up the totality of who I am. Like most of the people I know, they're a complex mixture of all kinds of things that make them unique in the world.
I love herbalists and MDs and everything. I love the holistic approach that a lot of us take. And yeah, you really explain that well. You use the word healer and humility. On your website, you use the word empathic healer. So I'm just kind of curious if you kind of define what an empathic healer is.
Yeah, and maybe even more of a compassionate, mm-hmm. Even beyond empathy, but to actually be able to come alongside an individual and to really go deeply into what they're experiencing and feeling. Mm-hmm. So when a woman comes to see me and her blood pressure is up and her blood sugar is way off, and she says, "Oh, doc, I know my sugars are bad. And, and I know I've gained some weight, and just, I know I'm not doing good, And then I said, "Well, what's been going on? What's happening in your life?" And she talked about the fact that her son's wife had left, and she's got 2 grandkids now, and her son's got chronic fatigue, and she's cleaning houses, and that they're kind of short on money, and she's under a lot of stress. And I just reached out and took her hand. And I just said, "Wow, I'm in awe of you. I'm just in awe of who you are for all that you have going on. Like, you're bringing it every single day. You're taking care of your grandkids. Your son is there. You're trying to help him. You're working." I said, your blood sugar, your weight, those are like little bitty things. I'm just in awe of who you are. And she sat there for a moment, and then she just started to cry. And then she just said, "I don't think anybody's ever said that to me." So when I think of that, what I think about is, how do I come alongside a human being to lift them, to hear them, to touch their hearts? Because at that moment, it really didn't matter what her blood sugar was, because we have time to fix all of that. But in that moment, she was hurting, and what she really needed was tenderness and empathy, and maybe even more than that, compassion.
I love that. That actually segues nicely into a question I wanted to ask you. You have this quote on your website that I was hoping you could expound upon. Connection is the best possible medicine. Tieraona ultimately seeks to connect people to the medicine and magic already present in their bodies and lives. And I think what you just said there illustrates that nicely. But yeah, could you expound upon that a bit? Connection is the best possible medicine.
Yeah, this illusion that we're disconnected is really just that. And it's good to be disillusioned from it, right? Sometimes to be disillusioned is good, because it's an illusion that we're disconnected. We're connected all the time. And sometimes we don't feel it. Sometimes we don't see it. But that need for human connection to nature, connection to animals, for myself, I have 2 dogs laying out here on the porch. I'm deeply bonded and connected to them. I'm deeply connected to this land that I live on. I'm deeply connected to my family. I'm deeply connected to my neighbors, I mean, so that sense of connection is so vital to us as human beings. There's a difference between solitude and being alone, right? And being lonely. I love my solitude and I love my alone time. I don't feel lonely. And I see a lot of loneliness and I see a lot of disconnection, people feeling disconnected from things around them. And, the studies clearly show that, people who identify as socially isolated or lonely have a much higher risk of heart disease. It's as dangerous. Listen to this. This was a Brigham Young did a big review of all the studies and found that basically it was being socially isolated and feeling lonely was as dangerous as smoking 3/4 of a pack of cigarettes. It was as dangerous as being an alcoholic. It was twice as dangerous as being obese for your health. So, we weren't meant to be in isolation. That's why it's so deadly. It used to be one of the greatest punishments in old days. I mean, those of us who grew up like in Sunday school remember like the banishment, right? You got banished. They sent you out and away. And this also was not uncommon for many indigenous peoples as well. If you were being punished, oftentimes they sent you out alone. And being out alone thousands and thousands of years ago would have been very dangerous because it meant you were alone to hunt, to protect yourself, to keep yourself warm, to build shelter, everything that you needed. So we're hardwired for intimacy. We're hardwired for connection. And one of the things I love is for people to be reminded of the magic that's inside of them. We're all magical creatures. We're all magical beings. And we are often much too fast to surrender our own magic and our own inner wisdom to some outside expert. And even if I saw you every week for an hour, as a doctor, I see you every week, 52 weeks, that'd be 52 hours. You've lived with yourself that much in 2.5 days. Nobody will ever know you like you know you. So don't, seek counsel and then digest that and see what feels right to you. And then using the best of your counsel and the best of your own intuition and wisdom, make the choices that are right for you and your family.
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. I was just at a wedding, my good friends Giuseppe and Ali in the San Juan Islands in Washington, and he's known as the free tea guy. And what he did was he was feeling lonely in his early 20s. Actually, he might have been there when you taught at the Free Herbalism Project. I'm not 100% sure, but what he did in his early 20s was he started going around the nation serving free tea to people in order to cure that loneliness, so to speak. And now he has this thriving community. Lots of people love him. He doesn't experience loneliness anymore. And I'm just kind of curious, do you have any suggestion, maybe like low-hanging fruit for folks that are feeling lonely? Any like small steps that someone could take to kind of branch out and maybe cure their loneliness?
I think that is such a wonderful story. I love that. Free tea for people, right? And that as a service, but also it served himself as well as serving others, right? So it was such a win-win. And there's so many ways that, if you're lonely, you could not be lonely. Like when my parents, we moved them here to New Mexico to take care of them when they were quite elder. And I met the people across the street and they had some kids. And I said, oh, you should come over. And they met my parents. And then those kids would bring them cookies and my parents would have them over. My dad would go outside and talk to the boy as he was playing basketball. And they met their neighbors down the street. And what I will tell you is that many people live in neighborhoods and have no idea who lives around them. Like everybody wants to just get in their car and go in their garage, close the garage and go inside and turn on the television. And they don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to know anybody. If you want to have a friend, be a friend. If you want to have relationships, be a person that somebody would want to be in relationship with. There are lots of hospitals that need people in the newborn intensive care units and newborn nurseries to hold babies and to care for babies because there's not enough nurses. there's lots of opportunity in senior centers to go and be of service. I used to take my kids and we would go down, I worked at healthcare for the homeless for a while, and we would go down and on Thanksgiving and Christmases and that we would go down and serve food to others, that were underserved. And I just think there's so many ways to be of service. And the example that you gave of the free tea guy, that was such a beautiful story. And it really represents somebody who also was proactive, yes, who said, I'm lonely, but I have within me the ability to fix my loneliness. And then he went out and did something about it. And so, if you're feeling that, then get that place inside of you when you're ready and go out and make those friendships. So powerful. So powerful.
I love that. Sometimes it's just a matter of starting small. For instance, before I started the Herbalist Hour, I was very nervous. And you know what? This is like my 60th interview and I'm way more comfortable about it now. So if you are feeling lonely, just do some tiny little small step. And then there's momentum that builds upon that. So good
true.
Advice. Yeah.
Going to see your neighbor and just saying hello is pretty low hanging fruit.
It should be. It should be. Instead of, as you said, go from box to box and, getting on the TV and stuff. It's good to be proactive and whatnot. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about some plants, since it is the Herbalist Hour after all. Amanda, my wife, and she used to work for Mountain Rose Herbs as well. She did the video for you for the elderberry syrup when you visit us, and the marshmallow one. And she said, Mason, you should ask Tieraona about marshmallow, because that was just a fun little video. And I was curious if you could talk about maybe a little bit about the history of marshmallow or some of the medicinal benefits and why you love Althea officinalis.
I do love her. I grow a lot of her in my garden, as a matter of fact, because I have a huge box with probably 30 plants in it, because I like to be able to rotate and take the roots, so that I can also use the roots. But marshmallow, Althea, comes actually from altho, which means to cure. So think about its name. It meant basically to cure. It was widely used for respiratory and digestive issues historically. But not just medicinally. The small plants of marshmallow, when they're very small, the upper parts were taken and cooked and consumed like you would cook spinach or other sort of greens. They become too tough as they get older, but very, very tasty when they're young. And the marshmallow, because everybody's like, marshmallow? I'm like, yeah, well, actually, the Egyptians would take the marshmallow and they would cook it in honey. And then they would offer that, the roots they would cook with honey. And then they would offer that to, people that were maybe of higher status for colds and coughs and digestive problems. And it was used all throughout that time until a pharmacist in England actually got the idea to take these roots and with sugar and that make them into a confection that children would want to take for, again, respiratory and digestive problems. So that was kind of the segue to the old marshmallow, right? To what people think of today as the sugary confection that has no marshmallow in it. I will just say that marshmallow really, I served some just recently at a retreat that we had out at our ranch. And I had taken the fresh marshmallow leaf and I had infused it in just room temperature water, and I'd let it set for about 16 hours or so. And then I took it out, and while we were in the forest, I served it, and I asked people a series of questions. Is it drying or moistening? Everybody was like, oh, it's very moistening. Yeah. It's moister than water. It's moister than moist. Then I said, does it feel hot or cooling? Oh, cooling. It feels very cooling. Does it have an odor? No smell. So then I'm getting them into saying, okay, so its medicinal effects are probably not due to like a peppermint with essential oils or volatile oils like menthol. Means that it's probably due to carbohydrate or polysaccharides because it's sweet, it's moistening, and it's not aromatic. So then we kept going. These were people who did not know anything about herbs. This was a women's retreat. And then eventually I told them it was marshmallow, and they were like, wow. And I said, so just through your tasting of this, you actually were able to learn a lot about this plant without ever knowing its name. People thought that was very cool. And they forget that our sensory, that our senses, we have co-evolved with plants since the beginning of our time on this planet, and we actually know them a lot better than we think they do. Everybody loved marshmallow. It is the best thing I know for just like, an acute heartburn. I love it for colds and coughs. It's great for gastritis. It's good for diarrhea. It's good to soothe a bladder infection, not really to treat it, but to soothe it. And one of the compounds that's in marshmallow, it's arabinogalactan. And arabinogalactan is also present in many of our immune herbs. And you have to remember that marshmallow really has this affinity for the digestive tract where 70% of all of your immune cells lie. And so marshmallow does have a beneficial effect on general immunity. So, wow, what safe for anybody. People say don't take it within 2 hours of a medication. I think that's a little overplayed. I really do, just by the way plants and drugs work. But it's really a safe herb for the very young, for the very old. You can take it during pregnancy. It's just a beautiful, beautiful herb. Malvaceae family. It's just gorgeous. Love it.
Yeah, it's definitely in my repertoire of, like, say, nourishing herbal infusions. I'll throw that in maybe like once a week, make a cold infusion out of it.
And that's interesting because we both talked about a cold infusion. I set mine at room temperature. I just set it actually in the garden. I put it out in the garden.
Oh, nice.
Amidst all of my marshmallow plants. I stuck it in my jar and put it out there and let it sit overnight. And the reason for this, and your listeners probably know, but is because it's so full in those mucopolysaccharides that if you subject it to high heat, you'll destroy much of its medicine. So it's best to do a cold infusion or a room temperature infusion for a longer period of time and then consume it.
Right. Yeah. Cold infusion almost makes it sound like I'm throwing ice cubes or something in there.
Usually
a room temperature. Well, so speaking of mucilaginous or demulcent herbs, you recently wrote a blog post about aloe vera. So I was just kind of hoping you could talk a little bit about aloe vera.
Yeah. So I don't think there's, a school kid that doesn't know what the burn plant is, right? It's like, and my mom always had one in the kitchen window, and we all grew up sort of knowing about aloe vera. And it was one of the earliest really traded herbs around the world. It was so revered for its ability to heal wounds and burns, just as effective as it is topically for healing tissue and relieving inflammation. It has that same effect when it's taken internally. There was a study looking at aloe vera in a syrup base for people with heartburn and comparing it with the commonly used heartburn medication. And at 4 weeks, it was highly effective. So aloe vera, I think of it for mouth sores, for a canker, think canker sores or stomatitis in the mouth. I definitely think of it for heartburn and reflux. I think of it for gastritis, anybody that's dealing with bowel issues. Now, there's something that's really important to remember about aloe vera is when you think about the leaf, and it's got that green outer kind of rind. And then inside is that beautiful jelly, like mucilaginous. Right between that outer part of that green rind, outer part of the leaf, and that mucilage is a very thin, almost yellow colored latex. And that's called aloin. And that's a very potent laxative. It's what we call an anthraquinone laxative. And that you could use it on occasion as a laxative, but you wouldn't want to use it long term. The National Toxicology Program actually published their findings that aloin can actually cause colorectal cancer, colon cancer, when it's used extensively. So I just have a hint of caution there. Also, if you look up aloe vera, it'll say, can cause low potassium, heart irregularities, all these. It's just got this laundry list of long things. That's all due to that yellow latex. It's not due just to the mucilage. So if you're using your own plant at home, like you're just wanting to take some of that gel out and then, put it in water and drink it, you just want to make sure. I usually take like a one of those cheese graters that has like the metal, like that metal slicer on it. And I slice the outer part off because it takes the latex with it. And then you can scoop out the gel. Otherwise, just look for aloe vera gel. If you're going to take it internally, look for one that says like the International Aloe Council on it. That's a little insignia that signifies that they've met the standard that most of that aloe has been removed and it can be taken safely. You know, my mother was treated for colon cancer, colorectal cancer, and she had horrific bleeding, horrific proctitis. And we put her on a slant board, like what you would do sit-ups on, like an incline. And we gave her an enema, high enema of aloe vera. And she kind of was making some moaning sounds. And I asked if she was okay because I was very concerned, like maybe we'd hurt her because she was so tender down there and from the radiation. And she said, it's like balm to my insides. It's like balm. And I mean, she just couldn't believe how soothing it was to her. So just as you would think of aloe vera topically on a burn or a wound, that's what it does on the inside too. It's one of our most treasured plants. For me, it's a treasured plant.
Yeah, like you said, you know, every household has it. It seems like I grew up in a very non-herbal household, and we even had aloe vera, and we'd put it on our burns and stuff like that. So
it was the kitchen plant, the kitchen burn plant.
That's right. Well, if you don't mind talking about maybe one more herb, I'd love to hear if you have anything about dandelion, one of my personal faves.
Yeah. Dandelion, the
That's
teeth
right.
of the lion, you know, which is a good way for children to remember what it looks like, because early spring, before it flowers, there are a number of these plants that could look similar. So that jagged teeth of the lion. And the other one that we don't generally tell our children is pissenlit, which was the pee in the bed, right?
Yeah.
That because it caused such a diuretic effect. I love dandelion. We eat it here because we live out in the middle of nowhere, so there's no pesticides or anything. So our dandelion, we can make it as a green and consume it all spring. So first, remember that all parts of the dandelion are edible or can be consumed. It's safe. But the other thing is that as a medicine, both the leaf and the root are very, very powerful. And one of the things that fascinates me is that we often think in this culture that the plants that are the most powerful are the ones that are the most toxic, right? And in my own world, I believe that the plants that are the most powerful are those that actually can be taken for prolonged periods of time and have a strengthening effect on the body. The leaf is an effective diuretic. It can be very useful for people that just have water retention, and you know, you travel, you take some dandelion with you to kind of get rid of the fluid retention. And the roots, and I mean very nourishing tonic too. And the roots are a powerhouse when it comes to the liver. So it helps with stimulating the release of bile from your gallbladders, so it can help with the digestion of fats. Many people, they eat kind of a fatty meal and they feel very bloated. They feel like very uncomfortable. Dandelion really remedies that because it's designed to help stimulate bile, the release of bile, so the digestion of fats, which also acts as a natural laxative. So dandelion can be very good for people who have sluggish stools, right? It has prebiotic activity to it, so it helps feed all the good bacteria inside of the gut. We're learning so much now, Mason, about the gut microbiome. It's like just staggering. And so dandelion feeds the good bacteria just like any other fiber would. So dandelion roots can be very, very beneficial in this way too. And then it has a protective effect on the liver. Think of milk thistle. Dandelion has very similar protective effects, and is a fraction of the cost. So dandelion, common, powerful, wonderful, nourishing for the liver, for the urinary tract, for nourishing the skin. I mean, it's just this wonderful, wonderful herb. It's edible. Just be careful if you're gathering it like in a neighborhood. A lot of people spray dandelions because, you know, with like Roundup and stuff, because they're trying to get rid of this noxious weed. My mom would give me a nickel to pull up dandelions, and my grandmother would give me a nickel to give them to her. So it actually worked out fantastic. You got a dime for every dandelion. I had to dig it up by the roots, but that's actually, like, for many people, dandelion, you come out of a long winter and it was one of the first greens that came up. And so people thought of it as a spring tonic. They thought of it as like helping to flush the body, to get rid of the stagnancy of just being like in a cabin all winter long. And so I revere dandelion. I don't know like how you feel, but I just love this plant.
Oh yeah, it's in the Herb Rally logo. I had a few comments to make actually. You were talking about the difference between like say a weak versus a strong herb. And I hope I'm not misquoting, but I'm pretty sure it was Jim McDonald that said gentle does not mean weak, which I always really adore that saying.
Said that many times.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Because I say that also about women.
Oh, amen. I love that.
It's long been one of my comments. It's like
that's
gentle
great.
does not mean weak. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Very strong. Also, there's a brand that I've been buying. It's called Olipop. Have you heard of this?
No.
This is not like a sponsored ad or anything like that, but me and my daughter would go to the store, and it's like these sodas. And it's interesting because then you turn the can and you look at the ingredients and you see chicory root, dandelion root, like all sorts of these prebiotic rich plants. Basically, it's a prebiotic rich soda. I want to say there's like 5 grams of sugar in it or something, but it's like this super delicious, like classic soda tasting recipe, but then it's just full of herbal medicine. It's like gone mainstream. I think that's super cool.
I love that. It's like the old sarsaparilla, right?
Totally.
I mean,
yeah.
Your own like a root beer.
Yeah.
With that old sarsaparilla. And of course, back when we didn't know sassafras may have all the problems it had with saffron, I love sassafras tea because it kind of had, especially if you mixed it like with a little sugar and carbonated, it had this really kind of nice soda taste to it. But yeah, so I'm so glad like chicories and dandelions and more of these plants are finding their ways into mainstream. Because the inulins, the fructooligosaccharides, a number of these compounds that are present in plants are excellent prebiotics. And what a nice way to get it in a soda-like beverage. 5 grams of sugar is not so bad. I mean, really, when you consider the amount in a typical soda pop. So I'm glad you found something you and your daughter enjoy.
Me too. Yeah, it's been nice to kind of go down memory lane with the old sodas I used to drink when I was a kiddo and actually kind of feel good about it. But well, why don't we shift gears a little bit and talk about the Medicine Lodge Ranch? How did that come to be, and what kind of offerings do you have there?
Oh, it's wonderful. I looked at this ranch. I wanted to get this ranch for about 6 years before we ever did. I was still living in Tucson, working at the University of Arizona, running Dr. Andy Wise fellowship program down there. And I had been wanting to come back to New Mexico. Part of my family has been in northern New Mexico since 1869. So I feel very drawn to this land. I love the geography. I love the architecture. I love the food. I adore the people. I love the sky. I definitely know that I have New Mexico deep in my blood. And so when we finally came here, I brought my husband out and he was like, "Oh my gosh, honey, this is really out here. And this cabin needs a lot of work. Like we couldn't even live in it." And I was like, I love it. And Mark Suazo was a man that was living out, kind of help caretaking. He's a sculptor, a Pueblo sculptor. And he said to me, the spirits of this land are old and they want you to sing to them. And I knew then that this was my place. And my grandmother used to take me to Medicine Lodge, Kansas, where the Comanche had surrendered and to the U.S. Army. And that was a very special place to her. She's part Comanche, and she would take me to the powwows, just the two of us. And it was the first time I'd ever gotten lost in music with the drumming. The drumming, I was a little girl and just getting lost in that drumming. And we were going home, and she's driving a pickup, smoking her cigarette. And that was my grandma, just cool as could be. And she said, baby, she said, when you were born, you were set on a path, and people call that your medicine road. And she said, you have to remember that everything you do in your life, everything from the way you move in the world, the way you treat other people, the way you talk to yourself, the way you eat, everything is your medicine. And, I think she planted the seed for what later would become for me integrative medicine, that I believe that many people already had that sort of rooted, grounded way of thinking about the way you live your life. So when we moved here, it didn't have a name, and we didn't even have an address. You can't get mail out here, by the way. There is
Oh, wow.
no mail delivery out here. And I said, I'd like to call it Medicine Lodge for my grandmother. And Jim loved it. My husband loved it. We have a couple 100 acres out here. And, this last week we had 10 bears,
Wow.
10 bears wandering and a few swimming in the pond. And we have elk and mule deer and mountain lion. Aloe is our female mountain lion. We knew her mother, Naja. I think she's long deceased. We're very connected to land here. We're very connected to the earth. I have 112 medicinal or edible plants on this land here that we caretake for. And we offer classes in the summer. People can come out here and we have a variety of them. Some of them are more class, doctors come and I can give them the science and quote the evidence, and that, which is important. But also take them out in the forest and give them teas to drink and sort of open them to that. And then other retreats, like our women's retreats that we just had, was really much more around ritual and being with the plants and plant tasting and talking about what it is to be a wise woman. And then had a ceremony in our ceremony lodge. And so it's a beautiful place, Mason. It's very special. Even local folks that come up and visit, they're like, I never knew this was back here. This is so beautiful. We have 9 springs on the land. So that's why we have so much wildlife, because we're a dry desert mountain. I live at 7,600 feet.
Wow.
So I'm a mile and a half up. So we have all 4 seasons, including pretty good snowfall. But we have the springs that naturally occur on this land, so it attracts the wildlife. And my husband had to do thinning of this land, because parts of it were so overgrown, it hadn't burned. And even then we were thoughtful, only in the wintertime and not during the summer, because of bark beetle. Don't want to injure the plants in the summer. Don't take junipers down, leave most of the oak, because our bears need the juniper berries. They need the acorns for feeding their young and for the females to become pregnant. So everything we've done here, we've tried to be tree shepherds or land shepherds, knowing that one day this land will be someone else's and someone else's after that we're only here for a brief time and that nothing really lasts forever.
That's true.
But I love it here, and it is my home. Hard to get me away from here.
I bet. Well, that's the miracle of Zoom, I guess. If someone were interested, they could go to medicinelodgeranch.com. Also, would one fly into Santa Fe? Is that where they would?
You can go into Albuquerque, or you can go into
Albuquerque.
Santa Fe. Albuquerque has more flights. Santa Fe, we have 2 gates. 2 gates in our little Santa Fe airport. It's like a lot of people come in there like, I've never been to an airport like this. And I'm like, we love our little Santa Fe airport. Albuquerque just has Southwest and more flights
Sure.
there. But we're only, Santa Fe is only about an hour away from Albuquerque, and we're about 50 minutes from Santa Fe. So we're, it is worth the drive when people get here, and we feed you well. Jim's famous salad bar. My husband makes his big salad bar. We grow a lot of our own vegetables and fruits out here too. So we have a pretty robust garden, but it's a lot to keep up because there's just us. So.
Well, dear listener, I highly encourage you to look at the offerings at medicinelodgeranch.com. I have made that drive from Albuquerque, I want to say, to Cloudcroft. I don't know how similar that is, but what a beautiful, magnificent part of the country. Yeah.
Cloudcroft is further down south. We're up north, but I've been to Cloudcroft and Ruidoso many, many, many times, and I love it down there too. New Mexico is the land of enchantment. That's what our state sort of motto, our slogan is. And it is enchanting. It is enchanting. There's a reason Georgia O'Keeffe up in Abiquiu, like this was her place she wanted to be. 51% of the people here are Hispanic or indigenous. We have Zuni and Pueblo and Apache and Navajo. And I mean, and Zuni. It's a land of deep tradition, of deep culture, deep rootedness. It's a place to visit at some point. Yeah.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Well, Tieraona, you're a highly accomplished person. I didn't even read your resume or anything like that, but you seem like a good person to ask. You're not only accomplished, but you're also very grounded and seemingly calm and centered. And I'm just kind of curious if you have any advice for self-love and self-care as you try to accomplish things in the world.
Yeah. Get rid of self before both of those words.
Oh, I got goosebumps. I love that.
It's just love, and it's just care. And when you love yourself as part of loving everything else. And when you care for yourself as if you care for everything else. And compassion or love or care that doesn't extend to oneself, I don't believe is real love. And so just fall in love with life every day. Trust yourself and spend time in the quiet so that you hear your own voice. I mean, Emerson said it so beautifully. I may get part of the quote wrong, but he said, there are voices that we hear in solitude that grow faint and distant as we enter into the world. And I think what Emerson was really talking about, a nature lover man himself, was that when we're in the quiet, when we're out in nature, when there's not all the noise and chatter, that we hear our own true voice. And when we hear our own true voice, then we know what we need to do. People say, I'm not on my path. And I'm like, there's only one path. It's the path that you're on. And if you don't like the direction, you can change it. But there's not a wrong path. You're just on your path. And be tender with yourself. I used to tell my children, you're stronger than you can even imagine. And you're more fragile than you probably know. And I mean, it's both of those things, Mason, that we're so strong and also we're fragile because we're human. And we have loss and we have hurt and we have pain, as well as joy and birth and accomplishment and friendship, And so it's the closer you can stay connected, for me personally, the closer I can stay connected to my earth, the closer I feel to my creator. I feel my creator everywhere when I walk in this forest. I feel and sometimes I feel bad that I don't feel it in the middle of New York City, but I feel most connected to my creator here because I see the abundance all around me. And I know that I am sacred and special, just like these trees and these stones and these springs. And that's why I don't feel alone. I also feel very connected to my ancestors. Some people tell me I don't know my ancestors, and I'm like, you don't have to know them. They know you. You're never alone. You are one link in a long chain, and you're not an accident. You're here for a purpose. You're here for a purpose. You just must find what it is.
I love that reframe of just getting rid of the word self. It's just love. That's so beautiful.
Just love. Just love.
I have this bad habit that I'm trying to get better at, where I'll go on long walks, and I go on long walks every day. But you know what I do is I throw my headphones on and I'm listening to stuff, say audiobooks or podcasts. And I think I'm being like proactive by learning, quote unquote. But really what I feel like I'm doing is just distracting myself. And then so I'm trying to get in a better habit of, sure, throw on the podcast on occasion, but also take the headphones off and just be, and then, go figure, insights start coming to me, and I start feeling more connected and whatnot. So I'm gonna heed your advice and just kind of try to be one with nature and whatnot.
I don't ever listen for practical purposes too. When there is this much wildlife out here,
yeah, totally.
That much wildlife, you want to be able to hear. Yeah. Also, like we came upon a rattlesnake just a couple of weeks ago when I was out with the dogs. And I mean, they're so good in many ways because they coil and, shake. But if you would have headphones in or on, you'd never hear those things. So For me, part of it is practical here. But the other thing is that I love being alone with my thoughts out in the woods. And And the dogs, the dogs walk with me. I love walking with the dogs too. They're my constant companions, but there's a calmness that we all have as we move. I mean, we've come upon bear when we've been out there. We've like walked right up on coyotes out there, a bobcat. I mean, because we're so quiet and we're just moving, but also those animals, we've never had a bad interaction. I try to avoid them. They're not pets. I'm very aware that they're wild animals, but I will also say that there's our own energy when we're out there. We're very calm. We're very quiet. We're not threatening. And none of the animals they've walked off, but they've never been aggressive with us. So I feel like many people need distraction. They need the distraction. Our daughter, when she did her vision quest, you've met Kiara.
Yep.
When she did her vision quest, she said that the first 24 hours that she thought she was going to go mad, because she said that there like the silence was deafening. And she said, I never knew what that expression meant, Mom. She said, but I realized I always have my music on. I always have a TV on. I always have something on. And she said to be out in that silence, she said, was painful, physically painful. And she said the next day it got better. And by her third day, she was more comfortable with it. But she said that first day, she said, Mom, I could hardly take it. She said, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And so that, just think of her age. She's, she'll be 30 years old. And so she's grown up with the internet. She's grown up with music. She's grown up with headphones. She's grown up with a cell phone. So she's had a lot of these things, and they are powerful tools that can connect us, but they're also powerful tools for distraction if we don't find time to separate from them.
Yeah, such a good reminder. And I gotta, when I see how my daughter's being raised, she's 12 years old, so it's even more ubiquitous in her life, and I gotta be limiting with the technology and whatnot. But well, I want to be respectful of your time, so hopefully I could ask a couple more questions.
Sure.
For the budding herbalist out there, someone who's looking to make herbalism like their career or life path, do you have just any like general advice for that person?
What a noble path you're undertaking. What a noble path. It is an ancient and old tradition. Find teachers that you can learn from, find botany people, go out with, it's like a lot of county extension agencies, a lot of community college, a lot of university have continuing education classes or just community classes where they'll take you out and identify plants with you. It's a great way to learn about them from like a botany person. There are wonderful schools that you can go to and learn from. Of course, there's many, many books that you can learn from as well. Remember that tradition and science is a powerful combination, that tradition is just as powerful a form of evidence as science is. So understanding tradition, understanding, how people have used this plant, and then looking to what the science says. It's like dandelion. We knew all kinds of things about dandelion, and now science has simply deepened it, because we didn't understand about the microbiome and all those things, but now we do, and prebiotics. So that blending of tradition and science can be a powerful combination. Try not to reject either. Try not to become so enamored with tradition that you think science has no place, or to worship at the altar of science and think that tradition has no place, because together they form a very powerful combination. And remember that plants can't really be learned from books, that plants must be experienced, and that you must go out and sit with them, sit in an aspen field, take a little aspen tincture, a few drops, and then go sit out and see what you feel, right? I mean, so I know that many doctors that I've met have learned a lot about plants, but they've learned them from books, and they've never really experienced the plants themselves. These are our companions, and they're gifts. And without the plants, we would not exist, because we need their breath like they need our breath. We are bound by breath. So But my daughter is studying herbal medicine, and she's going to the Colorado School of Herbal Studies right now. And I'm just loving it. And, she said, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I don't want you to do anything because, of who I am. I want you to do anything because of what calls you. And she says, Mom, I'm deeply called to the plants. And I'm like, that is a noble, honorable tradition. I've had a few people come to me and say, I really want to be an herbalist, but my mom is like, what are you doing? Like, that's ridiculous. And I said, yes, but you're not a child anymore.
Right.
You're not a child. You're a grown woman. You must find your own way and your own path. Your mother had her own path and her own life. That was hers to live. Now you are a grown, and you are not a child. And if this is what calls you, then you should follow it. So just be proud. Be proud of what you do. It's a noble tradition.
I love that. So beautifully put. So that's cool that Kiara is in Colorado school. That's really sweet.
It is.
Yeah. Well, we received a question from Diana Donovan, who's a Herbalist Schoolhouse member, and I believe this was from earlier, actually. So if you don't mind, I'll read this here. My goddaughter is undergoing dialysis after a traumatic birth experience, amniotic fluid embolism. She's asked me, are there any herbs I would recommend to strengthen her kidneys? I thought of dandelion or goldenrod or nettle. However, I'm not a clinical herbalist and I don't know contraindications with all the medical procedures she is going through. Any thoughts on the safety of these herbs? Thank you so much for anything you might recommend, Diana.
Right. So I would lean on milk thistle, which has many of the same protective effects for the kidney as it does for the liver, and is quite safe to take and to use. And I think that the nettle seed could be beneficial as well. That's one of David Winston's favorites. I've used it for myself for my own kidneys. And I'd be careful with powerful diuretics, only because they're going to be trying to keep that balance with dialysis. They're going to be trying to keep all of your electrolytes and your fluids. But when we think of nourishing and protecting, I think that the evidence for milk thistle today is quite compelling, and it's quite a safe herb. And its whole point of being is actually to protect healthy cells, and so to protect that. So that'd probably be where I would lean. And then nettle seed is another one that many herbalists use. Yeah.
Thank you, and thanks, Diana, for joining us, for asking the question.
And blessings to your daughter. Yes.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, are there any projects or new books you're coming out with you want to plug? No. Okay.
No, I just, I don't plug much. Come join us at Medicine Lodge sometime if you'd love to come. Sacred Science, we're doing, I was part of their Healing Kitchen series that they're doing. I did some kitchen herbal medicine, which I thought was great. And I think Rosemary Gladstar's on there, and a number of us came and we're on it. So, but I would just leave in closing that, I love wherever I travel. I go to Africa every year, and I have for many years. And wherever I go, whether it's Costa Rica or Uganda or Kenya, I always meet the plant people. I'm always asking to meet the plant people. And there is something that joins us. People that love plants are good people by and large. And it's a community that you find wherever you go. And that's why when I heard that, Mason, that you were like, oh, can you come on Herb Rally? I'm like, of course I will. It's like an herbal community. And I, I'm becoming an elder now in this elder community, in this herbal community. I was talking to some of my friends, I'm in my 7th decade of life. And it's like, over time, you just come to realize that as we are moving out and away, all these beautiful young herbalists are coming in, and we need to nourish and nurture them as much as we possibly can.
What a way to end the show. You're an inspiration to me, Tieraona. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the Herbalist Hour. Really excited to publish this episode, and thanks for the words of wisdom. And we'll end with that. All right.
Thank you, Mason.
Thanks,
have a great
Tieraona.
day.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our Herbalist YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an Herbalist Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbalist.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our Herbalist Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbalist.com/schoolhouse. Enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.